Good morning. Welcome to Morning Brew on Labour Social. I'm Graham Hughes, and it is the 12th, Monday, the 12th of February 2024. So today we're going to talk a little bit, not too much, because I don't want to drive you around the bend, about Grant Shapps, aka Connie Stockheath, aka Sebastian Fox, aka Michael Green, the con artist, con man. He's now head of defence. He's our defence secretary. Weirdly. I don't know why, but apparently he's furious. Furious. Always good to wake up Monday morning furious with the world. Why is he furious? Is he furious because the British economy hasn't grown in 17 years? So many people have fallen into poverty, which the Tories have now recategorised to say, well, it's not extreme poverty, so it's all right. Yeah, just because you've got no food and no heating doesn't mean you're actually poor, according to our new way of measuring statistics. And measuring statistics is a big part of what Grant Shapps is upset about, because he's upset by the looks of things. And feel free to correct me in the chat. I love it when, we get fact-checked live on air on this show. It's Corinne Stockheath. Yes, that's the one, Christopher. Grant Shapps. He of many names. No, I do like being corrected because it means that people are paying attention. And, I don't want to get things wrong. I'm not a Tory MP. I don't want to sit here and tell you things that aren't true. So, here's my understanding of the situation, right? What's happened is the MOD has seen recruitment drop by 25% to the army. We've also seen a massive cut in the amount of spending on the army, which means they've had to cut troop numbers down from 82,000 to a proposed 73,000 people by 2025, right, by next year. Okay, so that's the sort of brunt of it. And the basics, not the brunt, the basics of it. Also, we've got two sort of like big ships, like warships that can't even leave port at the moment because the main one didn't leave to go on military exercises with NATO, and then the backup couldn't leave either. We don't really know why. Technical difficulties. Anyway, so that's the backdrop of all this. We've got recruitment down, and we've got a problem with the amount of. I mean, we need more people in the army. Simple as that. Okay. Now, the ridiculousness of Grant Shapps calling the army woke is just beyond imagination. Like, think about what the army is and what it does. We can all be very grateful for the service of the men and women who've been in the army and the Air Force and the Navy over the years, including some of our relatives, some of my relatives. However, their job is to go out and kill people. That's the job they're signing up for. So the idea that the people signing up to kill people are too woke, and that's going to be a problem, is okay. Or maybe it's the recruitment drive that's the problem. So, for instance, one of the things that's been suggested, not implemented, just suggested by military chiefs is maybe we could loosen the, not security, I mean, people are still vetted very strongly, yeah? But at the moment, if you are British, you can turn up and say, I want to be an officer. Go to apply to Sandhurst, right? If you're from a Commonwealth country, I think you used to be able to do this until 1973, okay? You can't anymore because we joined the EU. We're at the EU now, so I think the military is like, well, we need more people to join the army, so I'll tell you what, we're going to allow people to apply to be officers from Commonwealth countries, and they might not have to stay in our country, in the UK, for 5 years before they do so. Okay? That's the big change by the looks of things that they want. I mean, if you can find some other stuff, and tell me in the chat what the other stuff that we need to do, that what they're proposing, that's like cause this furious, and that word's been bandied around quite a lot on this news story, this furious reaction from Grant Shapps, aka Corinne Stockheath. Wow, that's it. Okay. Now, look. The army's woke. Okay, look at everyone in charge of the main forces, right? The person in charge of the army, the first Sea Lord in the Navy, they're all middle-aged white men, like all of them. And they're not predisposed to being woke, being all like right on. These are military people. They're not hanging out in some kind of beatnik, peace-loving summer music festival dressed as hippies. It's the literal military. So they've been given targets that they have to achieve, both in recruitment and also diversity, that have been given to them by the MOD. And who's in the Ministry of Defence? And who is in charge of the Ministry of Defence? Oh, would it be the Defence Minister in charge of the ministry? And who's the Defence Minister? Oh, hang on, I've just done a big circle. It goes back to Corrie Stockheath. No, sorry, I meant Grant Shapps. So basically, the UK government has said to the Army and the Navy and the Air Force, you need to hit these targets. And military people, being military people, you know, they've gone, okay, we are target-driven people. We will achieve your targets because that's what we do. And then they've said, oh no, don't do that. Not like that. This is on the front cover of the newspapers. We'll dive into the newspapers in a minute. But have we hit peak Tory yet? I mean, well, I suppose it's not a peak really. Is it dip Tory? The nadir of Tory? Yeah. Have we hit it? Have we hit it yet? I mean, seriously, you've got the Defence Secretary saying that the army is woke because of policies given to the army by the department that is run by Grant Shapps. Help me here. Help me understand, please. In the chat, please help me understand. And what was really interesting is reading down to the article, which I've given the link to in the chat. In the description. It actually says that the objection was made by several retired officers in the British. Retired. So basically, some really old people who are not in the army. They're going, oh, well, you know, this woke thing, that's a bad thing, so I don't want it. Yeah, we've got a recruitment crisis. They're down 25%. Who do you need to join the army? Not old people who voted for bloody Brexit. Obviously, you need young people. How do you get young people to apply for these jobs? I mean, you know, you're putting your life in danger. You are signing up to possibly die for your country. Or to die for this country if you're not originally from this country. That's pretty noble. And as long as the background checks are done, you know, these kids who are taken in, a lot of the people who join the army are poor kids. You know, not as an officer level, but obviously at the sort of front level. The poor kids who haven't had necessarily a particularly good education. Maybe they haven't had a good upbringing, like home life and stuff. And what the army does is it takes this kind of disparate group of young men and women, and it turns them into soldiers. It's got a process that works so that they all think the same way. They can all work together. They can integrate as a team and make decisions like that, and you know each other so well that they can operate together under the most stressful conditions you could possibly imagine. I mean, the idea that allowing more people from ethnic backgrounds into the army or skewing it to encourage people from ethnic backgrounds to come into the army when you're desperate for more people to join the army makes sense, doesn't it? I don't know. Maybe there's some of you out there who think we shouldn't have an army and we should all hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but it's just not the way the world works. We need an army. And the government has been underfunding it for years. They've cut the troop numbers. They've done everything in their power to make it look ridiculous on the world stage, especially with these stupid boats they keep buying that don't actually work. I mean, you know, as a vanity project for whichever minister, and guess who is the Minister for Defence that week? Because you know what the Tories are like with the with the many appointments for different roles, and this guy. Like, I think the last guy who was the defence, who's stepping down at the next election, I think he might be ex-military. I'm not sure, but I sure as shit think that. I don't know. Check on this if someone wants to Google it for me quickly. Has Grant Shapps been in the army? I mean, has he? Does he know anything about the army? Does he know anything about the Navy, the Air Force? Does he, apart from what he reads in the Mail, I guess? About it being too woke. It's all too woke. You're all too woke. So yeah, I mean, you've got to try and get young people on board, and generally speaking, like, you know, the young people who are likely to want to join the army or think that you know, that's a good career option. And it can be for some young people. It can be a real game changer for them, especially if they want to get like a degree or something, and then they don't want to have £50,000 worth of debt hanging over them at the end of it. And like this, it just boggles the mind with everything that's going on right now that I've just spent the last 15 minutes talking about. The fact that the defense secretary thinks that his one job, which is looking after the army and the navy and the air force, the problem is not the lack of funding, not the fact that the Tories couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery. No, the problem is that they're too woke because they asked the question. They made a suggestion that Commonwealth citizens might not have to live here for the whole 5 years before they apply to join our army. Wowzers. Okay, so I'm going to dip into your comments in the chat. If you want to join the chat, please do. You've got to subscribe to join the comments. So it's a good little thing. I've got some news. Got some big news. Do you want a hook and tease? Yeah, I've got some really big news. What I'm going to be doing this evening. Is Rachel in the chat? Rachel knows what I'm doing this morning. Helen, thank you very much for the £2 super chat. Really appreciate that. That's really kind of you. Super chat. Woke seems all the Tory all-purpose insult. I know, but it gets to a level where like they're just pointing at inanimate objects and screaming that they're woke. It's just like anyway. Daily Bite Shapps, what's this? Good morning, Reagan Elite. Shapps knows bog all about bog all, says I'm one angry pagan, absolutely right. Vendetta says Grant Shapps is closer to Melvin Hayes than in 8.5 Mum. Rachel says, yes, Rachel is here. Rachel says, when Grant was Walter Mitty, he was in the army. No chance hasn't, but Ben Wallace was. That was the guy I was trying to remember. So Ben Wallace stood down. And do you know what? Although they were, you know, cutting numbers with the military, and I guess that's something that's come from higher up, Ben Wallace wasn't disrespected by the people in the military in the same way that what's his name? Johnny Mercer. He gets a lot of respect. I mean, you know, I think he's made a bit of a tit of himself, especially in the last couple of months, but he's quite well respected in the military. Like Grant Shapps, if he had any respect, which I don't think he did, like he's lost it now. Like no one in the army is going to look at that and go, "Yay, you're right about that." It just seems to like being in the army is a difficult job enough as it is. Like, why make it more difficult? I don't know. I'll probably doing a moment of truth about this later today if we've got time. But yes, I am. I'm busy this evening, so there won't be any. There won't be any swear jar again. Alan says, I come from an army family. They pared back the military after the end of the Cold War because we relied on NATO and the US to help us out. Now it's all gone pear-shaped. We're knackered. Yeah, Alan, you're absolutely right, Alan the Inquirer. So they're taking the numbers down to 73,000 at a time when Trump is saying very loudly that he's going to abandon his NATO allies because they're not paying enough. And I suppose this is linked to the Shapps thing, but like the idea that that NATO is this group of countries that pay money to America, and if they don't pay that money, then they're not, you know, shouldering their fair share of the burden, is nonsense. There was an agreement back in 2006 and it was I think it wasn't ratified until Obama's administration. This is an Obama era thing here. That all members of NATO would spend at least 2% of their GDP on defense. And at the time, it was possibly a response to 9/11 and the ongoing wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And yeah, it seemed like Russia was becoming more sensible. And this was before the invasion of Georgia, the invasion of Crimea, the invasion of Eastern Ukraine. Now obviously governments are going, oh shit, actually, yeah, that 2% target, I think we need to get to it. But there's no punishment for not getting to the 2%. It's like it's a deal, it's a club. Entry is voluntary, right? The idea that you're not going to go and help out one of the members, like you're supposed to, I think it's Article 5 that says if one country is invaded, all the other countries in NATO have to come to their aid, right? Which is the same thing we had with Poland. That started World War II because we had a deal. We had a treaty with Poland. So that the Nazis invade, we will come to your assistance. That because we have a treaty. Same thing in World War One. We had a treaty with France and other countries. Was it Italy? Was it Italy in World War One? And Italy just stopped, didn't want to fight or something. I think it was. Was it? Because it was a triple entente, wasn't it? And it was us and France and Belgium or somewhere. So someone who's better at history, look that up. It's been a long time since the GCSE World War One origins. But yeah, we had to deal with them, and we got to deal with NATO. But it's not contingent on them spending 2% of their GDP on defense. And Trump is out there saying we're not going to defend countries that don't spend the 2%, which isn't part of the deal. And he's gone one step further over the weekend. He's actually asked Russia to invade any countries that aren't paying more than 2% of their GDP on their military, right? On spending, I should say. But all the countries around Russia are spending more than 2%. In fact, in some cases, they're spending a lot more than 2%. Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, because they are worried about the fact that troops could come in from Belarus or from Russia itself. It's countries like France that's like, hey guys, we got nuclear weapons. Like, we don't really need to be spending this much of our GDP. We've got our own problems at home. Like, piss off. But Trump actually saying to Russia, yeah, you should invade those NATO countries is absolutely terrifying. And the fact that 80 million Americans are planning on voting for the creep in November is just mind blown. Mind blown. Patrick H. Someone needs to remind Trump that we have stood with America all the wars they started except Vietnam since World War II. We've paid our dues and Trump needs to do his homework. Yeah, but homework and Trump supporters aren't two things that go together. It's not like they went to school. I hope they did. They didn't pay attention and they certainly didn't get their homework in on time. Christopher says, it's funny how the spending is expected to on NATO standard equipment, a lot of which is manufactured in the USA. Pretty sure that's why we now buy from Lockheed Martin. Yeah, good point. UK military spending 200 billion, NHS spending 188 billion. Doesn't anyone think there's something wrong there? Yes, shiny one. Trump has the cheek to talk about anyone paying their bills. That's a very good point, Audrey. We had a treaty to defend Belgium. There you go. The Germans cut through at the beginning. So it was Belgium, France, and there you go. The Triple Entente describes the informal understanding between the Russian Empire, the French Third Republic, and the United Kingdom. Sorry, yes, Russia. I don't know why I just had a memory like that. I was like, there were three countries because it was a Triple Entente, and they were Britain, France, Oh yeah, Russia. Yeah, they dropped out after after the old revolution. Taylor Swift won the Super Bowl. She made several touchdowns. Good for her. Lol says Don Donovan. Yes, Taylor Swift did win the Super Bowl. So well done to Taylor for bumping the American economy up by 0.5% and winning the Super Bowl all in 1 year. The EU has, as a whole, outspent Russia by about 3-1 in 2021. Haven't checked the 2022 numbers. But still, the EU can defend itself. We are not relying on the US. Yeah, I hope that is the case, Jupp. I hope that's the case because, yeah, we can't expect that defense to come from the US. And do you know what? Since Trump's been president and since the invasion of Ukraine, you have seen a lot of countries increase the amount that they're spending on defense, which is shit and annoying. To go back to the point, and it was a Blue Badger who made this point about the NHS. Sorry, no, it was Shiny Warm. Shiny Warm, yes, you're absolutely right. Why are we spending so much money on defence in 2024 when we could be spending it on the NHS? Then we could be spending it on our own health, but we've got to spend it on stopping Putin doing mad shit. Great. Only a year until Trump pulls the US out of NATO and stops support for Ukraine. All the more urgent for the UK to get a lot closer to the EU after being by far the best option. Yes, absolutely, couldn't agree more. Belgium was a neutral state under guarantees by UK, France, and Germany. We're getting a bit of a history lesson this morning, which is cool. And then Stuart says, my nephew's son joined the army. He did not go to war, but he was about to move from teenager to young adult with a job and be more clear about what he wanted from a job. The problem is the government. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, mate. I mean, like the army does what it's told to do. That's the army. I mean, that's that's why it exists. And for the this idiot, this absolute idiot, Grant Shapps. I mean, he doesn't have much going on behind his eyes, does he? To be furious about the MOD's diversity policy, the Ministry of Defence's diversity policy, and it only affects a handful of people as well. Like with some officers, how many officers graduate a year? 100, if that, not many. There's a less than a quarter of them. I mean, what? Anyway. But any war in Europe seems to impact America eventually. Yeah, says Gary Arnold. But you know, just to go back to this recruitment thing. So, I mean, I might be wrong because I don't know enough about it. And I don't know recruitment in Sandhurst, particularly how it works. Maybe we could get someone who's been through Sandhurst on the show in the next couple of weeks to talk about it. But, you know, I think that, like, having someone who seems really good on paper, who will make really good officer material, and having to say no to them because they haven't lived in the UK for long enough, it's a bit counterproductive, isn't it? It's like we're happy for people from other countries to run our NHS, run our electricity grid, run our essential services, run our train services, own our newspapers, you know, and own more than 50% of our media. And we're happy for that, and own our football clubs. And we're happy. We don't say, oh, sorry, you've got to live here for 5 years before you can buy a football club or you can buy the Telegraph or whatever you want to buy. I mean, we don't do that. But with the military, it's like, we're not going to take you. We're not going to take you, even if your CV is like the best on the pile. It's like by far the absolute best. We're not going to take you because you haven't lived in the country. Although you will be, we can take you in 2027. Apply again in a few years' time. When you're crying out for recruitment, that's not not ideal, is it? Get James Blunt on. You know what? A few years ago, I proper hated James Blunt because his songs are horrible, but like he is very, very funny on Twitter. He has redeemed himself in the eyes of many by being very funny on Twitter. Gary Arnold, thank you very, very much for the super chat. Woo! No message, just some love. Thank you very much, Gary. And if anyone else wants to drop a super chat in, you're very welcome to. You've got another 5 minutes. And in that 5 minutes, we're going to go to the papers. Woo! I'm glad that worked. That would have been embarrassing. Right, so first of all, we've got the Times. The Times. We remember when Uncle Bulgaria wasn't behind the Times. Well, there it is. Rupert Murdoch's rag. Bonus ban for water bosses who break rules. I say, is that all? I'll put them in jail. Here's the thing, right? Do you know someone who's been arrested for pissing in the street? I do. You know, like, probably in the late 90s, early 2000s, you're going out clubbing and you're walking home and one of your mates decides to peel off and go and pee in a doorway in a back alley somewhere. Suddenly, blue lights. Well, you can't, indecent exposure in a public place, blah, blah, blah. Busies come along. They don't normally get, like, I don't know. They don't normally go to jail for it, but they could spend the night in the cells. I know a few people who literally got bundled into the back of a paddy wagon because they had weed against the wall, right? And I get the point that public urination is pretty disgusting and it's unhygienic and it spreads disease. So these bosses, the water companies, haven't just pissed in our rivers. They have pumped gigaliters of raw sewage into our watercourses, and now over 90% of our rivers and streams in this country, you can't swim in them anymore because the effluent content is too high. The beaches around the UK when we were in the EU were pretty good. They are pretty good. Many of them had, is it the blue flag or something? They're the special flag that you get to say, there's no shit on this beach. No, hardly any of them can fly that flag now. Now, if you can be arrested and put in the cells one night for one wee against one wall on the way back from a club in 1997, like surely the people in charge of the water companies should go to jail for like that, but times a million, which is what they've done. Anyway, so Daily Telegraph leads to woke extremists are rife in army. Extremists. Woke extremists. These are people, I guess these are a bit like Islamic extremists, or, you know, people who, you know, extreme, like maybe like terrorists, like maybe people who blow stuff up, you know? Maybe that's what he's drawing analogies with. So the army is so woke that it's going to start murdering innocent women and children with bombs. That's how woke it is. Yeah. He thought being woke was all about being awake to the injustices of the world. No, actually, it's all about murdering innocent women and children in the army for some reason, because you want everyone to be respected and be treated with the respect that they deserve, no matter where they come from, you know, what their background is. The important thing is their personality and whether they're a scumbag or not. And if they're not a scumbag, live and let live. Wow. Okay. Unhappy Wonder. We've got Nuts and Bolts. And Andy flies 8,000 miles. Devoted footy fan, Andy here, who he flew to see his beloved Bolton Wanderers play, and the game was called off due to a waterlogged pitch. Oh, lovely story. Here we go. Woke culture is poisoning common sense. This is from Shapps. So, hot on the heels of the transphobic, gruesome transphobia that was displayed by the Tories last week, this week it's all going to be about wokeism. Because that's all we got left. As Neanderthal said himself last year, we've got nothing left. We haven't got Boris, we haven't got Corbyn, we haven't got Brexit to fight on. What are we going to fight it on? Culture wars. What's woke? Transphobia. Anyway, right. So has Labour really changed? This is to do with the candidate for Rochdale, the MP for Rochdale, died last month, and now there's a by-election which will be held on February 29th, and it's emerged that the Labour candidate has said some pretty bad anti-Semitic slurs, and yeah, it's you could argue it's anti-Israeli, but in this sort of febrile context of the world as it is right now, especially with the Gaza conflicts continuing, getting more horrific by the day, and also the accusations that have been levelled at the Labour Party of anti-Semitism for many years, until Starmer came and tried to, very successfully got rid of that stigma, and now it's kind of back. And Phil did a video about this yesterday. I really suggest you check it out. I think Labour should possibly step back and say, you're standing as independent. You see, the thing is, he's only going to be in the role for 6 months. To take the whip away, just don't give him any more funding to get elected. If that means that George Galloway wins the seat, well, so what? George Galloway wins the seat. He's only going to get it for 6 months. He might actually turn up and do some work for a change. Martin Scorsese. I tried to find out what our hearts are made of. Muscle, mostly. Overseas students in push to clear names over English test cheating. This is another horrible situation on the same level as the post office scandal, in which thousands of people were deported because they were accused of having cheated their English tests, and it turned out it's probably something to do with someone else's faulty software or something maybe, and they're taking their cases to the High Court. There's a vigil there, people holding up the lights on their phones. That was for Brianna Jai, since it's 1 year since she was brutally murdered. It's in Wellington. And then this boy who was kidnapped, and it's so sad. Like his mum joined some mad cult and dragged his poor child along to live off grid, and just, I don't know, it's cruelty. I mean, he seems to be nice about it. He says, I may not see them again, but I still love them. I mean, it's your family, innit? You might not like them, but you have to love them. Hunt braced for double budget blow this week, which might explain the reason why woke is all over the front covers of the papers. And then this bit about Trump. I'll encourage Putin to invade NATO countries. Boris, what's his name? Trump, the US Boris, is unhinged, but I'll get rid of his face because I hate it. I don't want to see it again. But we probably will, unfortunately. Right, okay. So, another software problem. Indeed. Anyway, so tonight I have applied to go on GBBs. That's right. Gammon Box News. I don't know if they're going to let me ask a question, but they've said they're going to let me ask a question of Rishi Sunak, or to Rishi Sunak. So I'll be making the most of that if I'm allowed to do it. So please don't tune in to Gammon Box News because it's Gammon Box News and I don't want their ratings to go up. But please check out the clips that we use afterwards if I do get to ask a question of the nightmare that is. Rishi Sunak, the man who has presided over the highest tax burden and the highest tax burden in since ever. I mean, this is the mad thing about it. They say, since 1945. No, it's not like the tax burden was higher during the war. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't. Like, you go back to the medieval times, you paid your tithes. Tithes was in tenths. You paid a tenth of whatever you made to the local lord or whatever it was. That's the way it worked. You paid 10% of your income in tax. Now it's the highest tax we've ever been in history. And our living standards are the lowest. We've got the highest amount of child poverty in generations. We have the rivers are full of shit. I mean, just the NHS is falling apart. Our schools are crumbling. There was a story today about how the PFI in schools, well, probably worth doing a video about on itself, have these mad rules like the football pitches have to be a certain length of grass on the football pitches, which is just mind blowing. And the government's come along and said, we're trying to level up. And it emerged a couple of months ago that Durham has spent £2 million or something like millions, over £1 million on bidding for levelling up funding, which it didn't get. I mean, just what? So you've made us spend all this money that could be spent in the local community on bidding for money to be spent in the local community, and then you said, no, you're not going to get that money to be spent in your local community, and we're going to keep the whatever million you've spent on trying to get that money. Wow. I mean, if you want the Olympics or the Commonwealth Games or whatever, I guess you've got to put some money out, money where your mouth is. You want the World Cup, if you want whatever. But seriously, you're asking for money to help your region. You've got to pay for it. And then they go, no, sorry, no refunds. Pull the shutter down. Gurkhas have a charity. They reach retirement. They aren't well off. That's true. I mean, what's her name? I've forgotten her name now. Absolutely fabulous. Jennifer Saunders and Bond girl. Come on, what's her name? Joanna Lumley. Joanna Lumley has been doing a lot for the Gurkhas in recent years. Isn't grass length a thing in cricket? I don't know, but they've got a. This is to do with schools around the country. There's like hundreds of them where they've got these mad PFI contracts where they've got to keep the maintenance on certain things like crazy, like maintained. So if the pitch is waterlogged because it's been raining and no one's going to be playing on it, for a couple of weeks, they've still got to keep the grass at a certain level, and it's just like a huge waste of money. And they've all signed NDAs, so a lot of schools can't even talk about the money that's being wasted on these PFI contracts that were designed to get schools built. So understandable that they were used to get things built, but in the long term, you've got to look. You got to look at the T's that you crossed and the I's that you have dotted. Anyway, so I'm getting off. I'll see you maybe tonight if I get to ask my question on Gammon Box News. It starts at 8 o'clock. Rishi Sunak, Ask the Prime Minister live. I'll be there. As long as you don't Google me before I go on the show. Yes. tune in, I guess, afterwards. When it's clipped up and put on TikTok. All right. Thank you very much for watching. Need to go, peeps. Thanks, Graham, in chat. Have a good day as possible, considering the state of affairs. That's a good note to leave it on. From Orgy, thank you so much for joining us this morning and for joining me. And thank you for everyone in the chat. Thanks for the super chats. Really appreciate it. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.